After many years of planning and preparations, the Israeli Air Force flew in over Iranian airspace in the early hours of Friday, 13th of June. 12 days later, the Iranian nuclear facilities and missiles factories are severely damaged, although not completely obliterated, despite the assurance given by President Donald Trump. But what will happen next? Is it game over for the Iranian Islamic Republic of Iran, or will the regime strike back? And in the midst of these tectonic geopolitical changes, where stands the European Union? These are some of the questions that we will discuss today in this edition of the European Report. In the studio today, in the European Parliament, we have with us member of the European Parliament, Charlie Weimers, from Sweden, a member of the European Conservatives and Reformist Group, and also Vice Chairman of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. Yes. And of course, with us, Founding Director of European Coalition for Israel, Tomas Sandell. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz from European Jewish Press and Europe-Israel Press Association. Charlie Weimers, I will start with you. You have been very engaged since many years in foreign policy, and especially with regards to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I would like to know what were your thoughts when you woke up in the morning of the 13th of June and you saw what happened with the Israeli attacks on Iran. And what happens 3 weeks later as a ceasefire seems to halt?
Well, this is a continuation of a long, bitter reality that many, not least Europeans, not least Swedes like me, choose to ignore. In this reality, what Israel did, their actions can hardly be seen as an escalation. I remember Carl Bildt labeled it as such. But what Carl Bildt and others ignore is that the Islamic Republic never was just another regime with whom you could do normal diplomacy. It was and it is built on an explicit promise, the total annihilation of Israel. And that's really not rhetoric, it's doctrine. For almost 50 years now, they've acted on that ambition through proxies, through terror, and through a total disregard of international laws that other normal countries follow. So the idea that we're just in a phase of escalation misses the point. This is defense. It's the obligation to confront an enemy that has stated that it is incumbent on every Muslim to arm himself against Israel, and that the cancer of the Zionist regime will be eradicated, as Ayatollah Khomeini, the previous supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, stated. So I believe the path forward is quite clear. Targeting the regime's leadership and dismantling its ability to project violence has worked. So far, we've seen it in practice in Lebanon. In Lebanon, finally, the state of Lebanon is becoming able to actually assert its monopoly of violence, which has not been the case for decades. So my hope is that through sustained pressure, the grip of this regime will be broken, not only for Israel's sake, but for the millions of Iranians who are being held hostage by an extremist ideology, and for a Middle East that will be no longer dominated by fear.
So it's mainly a survival war for Israel.
It is, by all means.
Thomas Sandell, your organization, European Coalition for Israel, has for many years issued warnings about the Iranian nuclear threat. A threat, as you mentioned also, of survival for Israel. And during the last annual conference in last November, you had invited as guest speaker a leader of the Iranian opposition. Why your organization, European Coalition for Israel, is so deeply interested in Iran?
Well, thank you, Yossi. I think that's a good and relevant question. And I think part of the answer is going back to 1979 and what happened with the Islamic Revolution and what has happened ever since. That the Islamic regime, the Iranian regime, has been the biggest source of radicalization, destabilization, escalation of violence in the whole region. And as Mr. Weimers just said, has as its raison d'etre the destruction of another UN member state. And of course, for any peace-loving citizen for that matter, but even more so for Friends of Israel, this of course poses an existential threat that we can't just dismiss. And that's one of the reasons why we have taken this very seriously. I would also say that if we look at a longer time perspective, we just have to look at the time of the Shah. The relations between Israel and Iran were remarkably warm and good. And we have to remember that what has happened since 1979 is more an exception than a rule when it comes to the people of Iran and the people of Israel. And if one wants to be, biblical and looking back at King Cyrus, and I know for many, and not at least Donald Trump, if he would ever manage to broker a new normalization agreement between Iran and Israel, he would like to call it the Cyrus Accord, because King Cyrus, as we know, was the Persian king who helped the Jewish people to bring them back to Israel after the expulsion to Babylonia and to rebuild the temple. So some said, perhaps with a little bit of humor, that this is the way of the Jewish people to thank the Persian people for what King Cyrus did 2,500 years ago.
So long time relations between Jews and Persians.
Exactly. And I would add also that obviously, as an organization that subscribes to democratic values, and that these values should be applied to any people group, and that is including the wonderful people of Iran, very people with a very long civilization, well-educated people, and it's a tragedy what we've seen for the last 46 years, and I hope sooner than later that this regime will come to an end.
Charlie Weimers, the European Union has been discussing the nuclear threat for many years. Now they are discussing it, and you mentioned they are calling for negotiation, for dialogue, if it's possible with Iran, But in the meantime, Israel has gone from words to action against the Islamic Republic and its nuclear program and missiles development program. It seems that Israel has removed the nuclear threat for now, at least for now. What are your thoughts about, especially about the European Union position and attitudes towards the Iranian regime and the reaction in Europe to Israeli airstrike? We mentioned the fact that some spoke about escalation.
I think that the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, he was totally right when he said that Israel is doing the dirty work for us when they when they strike against military targets, nota bene, in Iran. Now, the European response up until now has been characterized by naivety and wishful thinking, that this regime could be pushed in the right direction with not so many sticks, but a lot of carrots. We saw this attitude play out during the women life freedom protests. I mean, while young girls were dying for their freedom in Iran, the EU could not manage itself to expel the ambassadors of the Islamic Republic. EU even sponsored campaigns in favor of the hijab during that time, by the way. And the reality is that this has been going on consistently. The past high representatives and the last one, Joseph Borrell, they were claiming that we don't have the tools that we need to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization because an EU member state needs to come up with evidence for that. But that was a lie. A secret legal opinion from the council itself showed that it's enough if a third country can come up with that evidence. And that has happened. The IRGC is designated by several other UN member states. But
not yet by the EU.
Not yet by the EU. And the EU leaders used a false argument to avoid this step. And this is very hard to forgive. This is a way of bowing before the mullahs, and we need to stop doing that. And I think what the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, suggested not only a maximum pressure campaign as pursued by the Trump 1 administration, but also combined with a maximum support campaign for the Iranian people would be the right way forward. For instance, why don't we support strikes against this regime, for instance, through a strike fund? That would be a good thing for the free world to actually pursue.
Tomas, Sandell, according to some estimations, the Israeli 12-day military airstrikes operation has cost, of course, Israel billions of euros. And as Charlie Weimers quoted very well German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, saying that Israel did the dirty work for Europe. What do you think that Europe should tell Israel and should say thank you, Israel, for doing the job?
Yeah, that will be the day when the European Union will officially thank Israel for anything. But coming back to the reactions in Europe after the strike, we have to keep in mind, of course, that this is just as much a NATO issue as it is an European Union issue. And I was positively surprised that, you know, the major leaders within NATO and the EU, they were crystal clear in saying that our goal is the same as for Israel, to make sure that Iran will never have nuclear capabilities. And then, of course, the second chapter of that verse is always a little bit, you know, modification. But I think by and large that the Western world was very much happy about what happened, even more so in close circles than what they could say publicly. But more needs to be done. And it's interesting that our new High Representative Kaja Kallas had never, until the nuclear negotiations in Geneva, ever raised the issue of Iran with anyone, neither here in the European Parliament nor with the Council members. And I would expect, if for nothing else, that Kaja Kallas, as a woman, would show solidarity with the women life freedom movement in the same way as the president of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola.
And the Commission President.
And the Commission President. So I think that, as Mr. Weimers rightly said, that we have to, there are certain limits in the Protocol of International Relations. Of course, you cannot officially recognize an opposition group while you're in friendly relation with another member state. But there are other ways of expressing support for a future democratic Iran. And there I think that the EU leaders have been way too cautious. For example, what I would suggest is that, again, Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince, and someone I personally would consider as a leader that would be very much in line with Western values, that he would start gradually getting more recognition also here in the European Parliament, and would be welcomed by the President of the European Parliament as an expression of solidarity, or if for nothing less, just to sit down and listen, to say, things are changing so quickly now in the Middle East. Let's not make the same mistake as the EU did with the Arab Spring. And you remember 1 week they would receive Gaddafi with a red carpet in the European Parliament. The next week they realized, well, now we have to delete all the pictures because this looks ridiculous. Let's for once be brave and courageous and realize what is happening and stand on the right side of history and stand with the people of Iran.
Is it possible, do you think, to invite?
If there is a will, there is a way. So I think, with the looking at protocol issues, for example, that yesterday the Crown Prince met with Boris Johnson in London. So there are always ways, and I think this is the least that the European Union could do at this very critical juncture.
Charlie Weimers, if we look to the future of the region and of Iran, what needs to be done now? I think, of course, the Mullah regime, despite the fact that Israelis had made airstrikes in Iran and obliterated some of the nuclear facilities, the Mullah's regime is still in place. What would be the role of Europe to bring a different situation in Iran and to make them completely banned, like you mentioned, the IRGC, still not blacklisted by Europe. So what is the solution now? Is it inside Iran or outside?
Well, the Islamic Republic's survival depends on repression at home and aggression abroad. A viable future for Iran means the end of this regime, full stop. And I think that is bound to happen. And that future exists both inside and outside of Iran. Inside Iran, there's a generation that has risked almost everything for a change by going out on the streets. And outside Iran, there is a capable, organized opposition. The Iranians, the Iranians, they don't need Europe to speak for them, but they do need Europe to stop legitimizing their oppressors. That means sanctioning the IRGC, cutting support to regime-linked institutions, and publicly backing the democratic opposition. I had the privilege to receive His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi here in the European Parliament a few years ago, and I do really hope that the Speaker of this House, President Metsola, will take the initiative to invite him. That would be a very strong signal. And we should also recognize that only a tiny minority of the Iranian people actually support this regime. A Dutch poll in 2021 showed that only 16% support the Islamic Republic. 65% of the population is against the death to Israel ideology of the regime, and that says something. This regime is much weaker than European leaders anticipated.
And some information mentioned that there is a repression now against people who are said to be spies for Israel, Mossad agents there inside, because the regime is probably very fragile after what happened.
Yes.
So, Tomas, Sandell, I would like to ask you a question related to EU, Israel, and Iran. You know, we saw that while Israel was in a survival war against Iran nuclear program, inside the European Union they were discussing a report reviewing its EU-Israel association agreement on the basis of Article 2, which mentioned human rights because of what happens in Gaza. Do you think that these two problems are linked or not? We heard last week at the European Summit, I think, Belgium Prime Minister saying this has nothing to do. You have the association agreement, and in another way you have the Gaza situation and the Gaza war. So what do you think?
No, I think that there are certain elements, certain countries, certain political fractions in Europe that will never be satisfied before the Jewish state is defeated, full stop. And they will always find one approach or another to criticize. And we have to look back. I mean, many of us have been in this business for many years, so we know that this discussion is nothing new. And also the ones who are pushing for it, we can define them very well, from which countries they come and from which political groups, not from the ECR. I can say, based also on the vote ranking which we did.
Yeah.
And I think it's disgraceful. You asked me earlier, how can the EU thank Israel for having at least eliminated for now the nuclear threat over Europe? And the next discussion they have is to say, well, how can we sanction Israel? I think it's disgraceful. There's no more diplomatic word that I can think of. And I think this needs to be said out loud.
Last question to both of you, if possible. Charlie Weimers and Tomas Sandell, what is your message today to the people of Iran and to the decision makers in Europe? What do you tell them? How should they behave? Not only what can happen in Iran, but also outside Iran. What is your message to them?
Well, my message is quite simple. Many around the world know that the regime is not speaking for the people of Iran. The Islamic Republic is not eternal. No dictatorship ever is. So I truly believe in a future in which the women and men in Iran have the same freedoms, rights and opportunities that my daughters and my son have. And that future will be possible only without the Islamic Republic. And I will do what I can to make that happen. But in the end, it is the decision of the Iranian people.
Tomas Sandell, the same question.
Yeah, I think this is the 1989 moment for the people of Iran. We've been there before in Europe, where no one thought Soviet Union could ever change, or that the countries that were controlled by Soviet Union at the time could be free. We are at that moment, I believe, for the people of Iran right now. And I think it's important for the people of Iran to know that they have friends in Europe, that we are standing with them. They have friends in political important positions like Mr. Weimers. And I believe there will be more and more who will join this movement for freedom also here in Europe. The more they realize that this is the moment, this is the 1989 moment.
This brings us to an end of this program. I would like to thank both Member of the European Parliament, Charlie Weimers, and the founding director of the European Coalition for Israel, Tomas Sandell, for joining this program. To our readers, I would like to say, as always, if you like our program, please feel free to share the YouTube link with your friends and colleagues. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and you just watched the European Report. See you again next month.